You're all welcome to today's news analysis. If you care about Africa, power, and the future of leadership, this one matters. Please take 1 second, subscribe, like this video, and turn on your notification bell so you don't miss deep stories like this. We break it down clean, calm, and real. Today, we are talking about Burkina Faso. We are talking about Captain Ibrahim Traoré. And we are talking about a decision that shocked Africa. All political parties have been dissolved. No elections. No campaigns. No opposition parties. This happened weeks after an assassination attempt on Traoré. Why did he do it? Is this about unity or power? Is Burkina Faso being saved or silenced? Let's break it down properly. This decision came fast. And it came hard. Burkina Faso's military government announced that all political parties are now dissolved. Every party. No exception. The reason they gave was clear and simple. They said the country needs national unity. They said politics has divided the people. They said the system has been abused for years. But timing matters. This move came weeks after an assassination attempt on Ibrahim Traoré. That changed everything. When a leader survives an attack, trust breaks. Fear rises. Control tightens. The government says elections are cancelled because the country is not stable. They say security must come first. They say reform must happen before politics can return. Burkina Faso has faced coups, terror attacks, and chaos for years. The military says politics only made things worse. They claim political parties were used for greed, for tribal fights, for foreign interest. So now, the military is in full control. No campaigns. No votes. No loud opposition voices. For some people, this feels like order. For others, it feels like silence. And this is where the debate begins. Since the announcement, official statements have repeated one message again and again. The authorities say political activity, as it existed before, is suspended in the interest of the state. According to the military leadership, years of party politics weakened institutions and slowed decision-making during security crises. Burkina Faso has been fighting armed groups across large parts of the country. Attacks on towns, roads, and military posts have continued despite earlier promises by past civilian governments. The junta argues that political competition distracted leaders from urgent security work and allowed corruption to grow without control. Officials insist this decision is not targeted at one group alone. They say all parties are treated the same and that no political actor is above the new order. In their words, the goal is to reset the system and remove structures they believe no longer serve the people. The assassination attempt on Captain Ibrahim Traoré is a key part of this moment. Though details remain limited, the attempt raised alarms inside the security structure. After such an incident, the leadership moved quickly to close what it sees as political gaps that could be used to create unrest. The government has also confirmed that all planned elections are suspended until further notice. No new date has been given. Instead, authorities speak of a transition period focused on security reform, administrative changes, and national rebuilding. During this period, political meetings, party offices, and campaign activity are no longer allowed. Public life, according to the junta, must be calm and unified while the state is reorganized. Any action seen as political agitation is expected to face strict response. Supporters of the move point to the country's long record of instability. Since independence, Burkina Faso has experienced repeated coups and short-lived governments. For them, the ban on parties is seen as a pause, not an end. Critics, however, warn that removing political structures removes accountability. They argue that without parties and elections, citizens have fewer ways to express disagreement or demand change. These concerns are already being discussed by civil groups and regional observers. International reaction has been cautious. Some partners have called for clarity on timelines and legal basis. Others have urged restraint and respect for basic rights, even during a transition. Inside Burkina Faso, daily life continues, but the political space has narrowed. The full impact of this decision will depend on what comes next, how long the suspension lasts, and whether promised reforms are clearly defined and delivered. State media has emphasized discipline and loyalty within the armed forces, stressing that unity at the top is necessary to avoid internal conflict. Officials say the command structure remains intact and that security operations will continue without interruption across the country. Legal experts note that the decree dissolving parties places most political activity under direct state control. They explain that such measures are usually temporary, but their duration depends entirely on the authority in power. For citizens, this creates uncertainty about participation, representation, and the path back to civilian rule. At this stage, the junta maintains that dialogue will come later, after stability is restored. No formal framework has been published to guide that process. As a result, attention is now fixed on governance decisions, security outcomes, and whether clear benchmarks will be shared with the public. These unanswered questions define the current moment and shape how this decision will be judged in the months ahead. For now, the policy stands, enforced by decree, with immediate effect nationwide. More updates are expected as authorities clarify next steps soon ahead. Public reaction continues. Ibrahim Traoré and the military leadership insist that this decision is not about personal power. In official statements, they frame it as a necessary step to protect the state and reduce internal conflict. According to the authorities, political parties have become tools for division rather than development. The junta argues that the multi-party system in Burkina Faso failed to deliver stability. They point to years of insecurity, weak governance, and constant political tension. In their view, parties focus more on elections and alliances than on protecting citizens or reforming institutions. They also claim that some political actors maintained close ties with foreign interests. These links, the military says, weakened national sovereignty and allowed external influence to shape internal decisions. By dissolving parties, the leadership says it is cutting off those channels. National unity is now the central message. Government officials stress that Burkina Faso must speak with one voice during this period. They argue that disagreement in times of crisis can slow decisions and create space for violence to spread. From the military's perspective, centralized authority allows faster action. Security plans, economic measures, and administrative reforms can be carried out without delays from political debate. The leadership believes this approach gives them room to act decisively. However, this position is raising serious concerns. Analysts warn that unity enforced by decree is different from unity built through consent. Without political competition, there is no formal structure to challenge decisions or propose alternatives. Civil society groups note that political parties, despite their flaws, often serve as channels for public opinion. Removing them reduces organized participation and leaves citizens with limited options to influence governance. The cancellation of elections adds another layer to the debate. Elections are usually the main tool for measuring public support. Without them, there is no clear way to assess whether the population agrees with the current direction. The military leadership has not provided a clear timeline for the return of political activity. Instead, they speak broadly about reforms and stabilization. This lack of detail fuels uncertainty and speculation. Supporters of Traore argue that Burkina Faso is in an exceptional situation. Armed violence remains active in many regions. Displacement, economic pressure, and fear continue to shape daily life. In such conditions, they say, normal politics may not function properly. They also point to past civilian governments that failed to control insecurity. For these supporters, strong leadership is seen as a correction to years of weak rule. They believe discipline and authority are required before democracy can be rebuilt. Opponents respond that power without limits often lasts longer than promised. They reference past transitions in the region that began with reform goals but ended with prolonged military control. Regional organizations are watching closely. West Africa has experienced a rise in military governments over recent years. Each new decision affects the wider political climate and sets examples for other countries facing similar pressures. Some international partners have expressed concern about governance standards. They emphasize the importance of political inclusion, even during transitions. Others remain cautious, focusing mainly on security cooperation. Inside the country, public discussion is careful. With political structures suspended, open criticism carries risks. Many citizens are waiting to see concrete results before forming strong opinions. Economic conditions also play a role. Burkina Faso faces inflation, limited resources, and dependence on external support. Decisions taken now will influence investment, aid, and diplomatic relations. The leadership insists that reforms will address corruption and administrative weakness. They argue that removing party influence will allow institutions to function more professionally. Yet experts warn that institutions need oversight to remain effective. Without independent political actors, accountability depends entirely on internal controls within the state. The balance between security and freedom remains at the center of this issue. Too much focus on control can reduce trust. Too little focus on order can deepen chaos. As of now, the government continues to defend its decision as legal and necessary. No alternative framework has been presented to replace the role parties once played. The question facing Burkina Faso is not only about today's policy, but about its direction. Whether this period leads to genuine reform or extended control will depend on transparency, results, and a clear path forward. For observers, the situation remains fluid. Statements from the junta suggest confidence, but the absence of political competition changes the structure of governance in a fundamental way. What happens next will define how this decision is remembered. The issue is no longer just about dissolving parties, but about how power is exercised when opposition is removed. The decision taken in Burkina Faso is now part of a wider African conversation. Military governments, civilian leaders, and regional bodies are all paying attention. What happens next will not affect Burkina Faso alone. It will influence how power and reform are discussed across the continent. In recent years, several West African states have experienced coups and military takeovers. Each case follows its own path, but similarities are hard to ignore. Security failures, public frustration, and loss of trust in political elites often come first. Military intervention follows, with promises of change. Burkina Faso fits this pattern. The leadership argues that strong control is required to rebuild the state. By dissolving political parties and suspending elections, the junta says it can focus fully on security and reform without distraction. For regional organizations, this creates a challenge. Groups that promote democratic norms must balance principle with reality. Pressuring military governments too hard can reduce cooperation. Ignoring governance concerns can weaken credibility. As a result, responses have been measured rather than forceful. Some African leaders view the situation with caution. They understand the risks of instability spilling across borders. Armed groups do not respect national lines. Weak governance in one state can affect neighbors through migration, trade disruption, and insecurity. At the same time, there is concern about precedent. When political parties are removed and elections postponed without clear timelines, the idea of temporary rule becomes unclear. Other governments facing pressure may see this as an option. Public opinion across Africa is divided. In some circles, Ibrahim Traoré is seen as a symbol of resistance against old systems. His age and rhetoric appeal to young people frustrated with long-standing problems. For them, decisive action is welcomed. In other circles, the move raises alarms. Political parties, even flawed ones, are seen as essential to long-term stability. Removing them can reduce dialogue and push dissent underground rather than resolving it. The future of governance in Burkina Faso now depends on outcomes. If security improves, institutions become stronger, and living conditions stabilize, support for the military may grow. Results can change opinions faster than speeches. If conditions worsen or stagnate, pressure will increase. Without elections, frustration has fewer formal outlets. This can create tension over time, especially among youth and urban populations. Economic management will be a key test. Burkina Faso faces limited resources and high needs. Decisions on spending, aid, and development will shape daily life. Partners may adjust their support based on governance signals. The junta has spoken about sovereignty and independence. These themes resonate across Africa. However, complete isolation is not practical. Trade, security cooperation, and humanitarian support remain critical. Diplomatic engagement is likely to continue, but with caution. Governments and institutions will seek clarity on the transition process. Clear communication could reduce uncertainty and build confidence. Legal clarity is also important. Decrees and emergency measures can stabilize situations temporarily. Over time, frameworks and laws are needed to guide authority and protect rights. Observers will watch for signs of institutional development. For citizens inside Burkina Faso, the focus is practical. Safety, food prices, and access to services matter more than political theory. If daily life improves, patience may follow. If not, questions will grow. Media space has narrowed since the decision. With parties dissolved, political debate is limited. This places greater responsibility on state communication to remain accurate and transparent. The role of the military itself will also be examined. Maintaining unity within the armed forces is crucial. Internal divisions have undermined past transitions in the region. The leadership has emphasized discipline to avoid such outcomes. Over time, the absence of a clear political roadmap could become the main issue. Transitions without defined steps risk losing direction. Benchmarks, timelines, and inclusion help manage expectations. Africa's history shows mixed outcomes from military-led reforms. Some transitions led back to civilian rule. Others became prolonged periods of control. Each case depends on leadership choices and public response. For now, Burkina Faso remains in a holding phase. Power is centralized. Political activity is suspended. The stated goal is rebuilding the state. How long this phase lasts, and what replaces it, will determine the legacy of this decision. The focus has shifted from announcement to execution. Across Africa, the message is clear. Governance models are under review. Citizens are watching outcomes, not labels. Stability, dignity, and opportunity remain the main demands. The situation continues to develop. Statements, policies, and results in the coming months will shape perception. What is unfolding is not just a national decision, but a test case for leadership, reform, and accountability in a changing Africa.